Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Geopolitics with Ramin. In today's video, I would like to talk about the Greater Israel Project and Zionism, religious Zionism. I think this is a good video to do because of Trump's latest comments about basically ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip to make it into some sort of beach resort of some sort. But anyway. So I'm going to go through the biblical references and certain modern geopolitical um, analysts, Israeli analysts, of how this will come about, basically, and perhaps how it will benefit Israel, and some argue how it will be to the detriment for Israel, but to sort of sum it up, the Greater Israel Project can be found or has its roots in the Old Testament, and it can be compared to the Lebensraum that the Nazis wanted to create in the former Soviet Union by taking large swaths of land and or exterminate and enslave the Slavic population in the area. That's what the Wehrmacht did in the former Soviet Union. The biblical references for this expansionist ideology comes from Genesis 15:19 to verse 21, and Numbers 43 and Ezekiel 47. And later on in this video, I will proceed to read from them. But first, I would like to show you guys a video clip of Avi. Let's see, what's his name? Avi Lipkin, I believe that's his name, who is a religious Zionist, an Israeli politician, and is described as a true pioneer in Jewish-Christian relations. So let's watch that video clip so you guys get an idea of what Greater Israel is.
Eventually, our borders will extend from Lebanon to the Great Desert, which is Saudi Arabia, and then from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates. And who's on the other side of the Euphrates? The Kurds. And the Kurds are our friends. So we have the Mediterranean behind us, the Kurds in front of us, Lebanon, which really needs the umbrella of protection of Israel. And then we're going to take, I believe we're going to take Mecca, Medina, and Mount Sinai and purify those places.
Okay, so the Greater Israel Project, where can you find this in the Bible? From the little research that I have made till now, and I'm currently reading the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, but I found the first reference in Genesis chapter 15, verse 18 to 21, and it goes like this. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, quote, "To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Canaanites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites." And I believe these are, for the most part, various different Semitic peoples that lived across the Middle East. The Canaanites I do recognize, because a lot of Palestinians have Canaanite background. In fact, modern-day Palestinians would be the descendants of Canaanites, Hebrews, ironically, Hebrews, Greeks, and Canaanites, and to a certain extent, Arabs, and they're also limited. There's like a limited African community there as well, but for the most part, it's this, right? So yeah, this is the first reference that I could find. The next ones are Numbers 13 and Ezekiel 47, I believe, and I will read them too. All right, so in Numbers 34, it goes like this. The Lord said to Moses, "Command the Israelites and say to them, When you enter Canaan, and the land that will be allotted to you as an inheritance is to have these boundaries. Your southern side will include some of the desert of Zin along the border of Edom. Your southern boundary will start in the east from the southern end of the Dead Sea. Across south of Scorpion Pass, continue on to Zin and go south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it will go to Hazar Adar and over to Asmon, where it will turn. Join the Wadi of Egypt and end at the Mediterranean Sea. Your western boundary will be the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. This will be your boundary on the west. For your northern boundary, run a line from the Mediterranean Sea to Mount Hor and from Mount Hor to Lebo Hamath. Then the boundary will go to Zedad, continue to Zifron, and end at Hazar Enan. This will be your boundary on the north. So in verse 10 it goes, for your eastern boundary, run a line from Hazar Enan to Shepham. Then in 11 it says, the boundary will go down from Shepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain and continue along the slopes east of the Sea of Galilee. Verse 12 goes, then the boundary will go down along the Jordan and end at the Dead Sea. This will be your land with its boundaries on every side. Moses commanded the Israelites assign this land by a lot as an inheritance. The Lord has ordered that it be given to the 9.5 tribes because the families of the tribes of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance. These 2.5 tribes have received their inheritance east of the Jordan across from Jericho toward the sunrise. The Lord said to Moses, these are the names of the men who are to assign the land for you as an inheritance. Eleazar, the priest, and Joshua, son of Nun. And appoint one leader from each tribe to help assign the land. These are their names. Caleb, son of Jephunneh, from the tribe of Judah. Shemuel, son of Amihud, from the tribe of Simeon. Elidad, son of Kislon, from the tribe of Benjamin. Buki, son of Jogli, the leader from the tribe of Dan. Haniel, son of Ephod, the leader of the tribe of the Manasseh, son of Joseph. Kemuel, son of Shiftan, the leader of the tribe of Ephraim, son of Joseph. Elizaphan, son of Parnak, the leader of the tribe of Zebulun. And Paltiel, son of Azan, the leader of the tribe of Issachar. Ahihud, son of Shelomi, the leader of the tribe of Asher. And Pedahel, son of Amihud, the leader of the tribe of Naphtali. These are the men the Lord commanded to assign the inheritance for the Israelites in the land of Canaan. So this is Numbers 34:11 that I just read for you guys. In the next chapter, which is Ezekiel 47, it goes, the river from the temple. And it goes here. The man brought me back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. As the man went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits, and then led me through water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000 and led me through water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000 but it was a river that I could not cross because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in. A river that no one could cross. He asked me, Son of a man, do you see this? Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, This water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Araba, where it enters the Dead Sea. When it empties into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because the water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore from En Gedi to En El Eglaim. There will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. But the swamps and marshes will not become fresh, they will be left for salt. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on the banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fall. Every month they will bear fruit, because water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing. Now it goes to the boundaries of the land. I guess the first verses here describe kind of like what kind of landscape or environment this greater Israel will be. Uh, the boundaries of the land, and it starts with verse 13 here. This is what the sovereign Lord says. These are the boundaries of the land that you will divide among the 12 tribes of Israel as their inheritance, with 2 portions for Joseph. You are to divide it equally among them, because I swore with uplifted hand to give it to you, to your ancestors. This land will become your inheritance. This is to be the boundary of the land. On the north side, it will run from the Mediterranean Sea by the Hethlon road past Lebo Hamath to Zedad, Berotha and Sibraim, which lies on the border between Damascus and Hamath, as far as Hazar Hatikon, which is on the border of Hauran. The boundary will extend from the sea to Hazar Enan along the northern border of Damascus, with the border of Hamath on the north. This will be the northern boundary. On the east side, the boundary will run between Harun and Damascus, along the Jordan between Gilead and the land of Israel, to the Dead Sea and as far as Tamar. This will be the eastern boundary. Let's see here. On the south side, it will run from Tamar as far as waters of Meribah Kadesh, then along the Wadi of Egypt to the Mediterranean Sea. This will be the southern border. On the west side, the Mediterranean Sea will be the boundary to a point opposite Lebu Hamath. This will be the western boundary. You are to distribute this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel. You are to allot it as an inheritance for yourselves and for the foreigners residing among you and who have children. You are to consider them as native born Israelites along with you. They are to be allotted an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. In whatever tribe a foreigner resides, there you are to give them their inheritance, declares the sovereign Lord. Okay, so I'm going to read from I think this is more of like a research paper by Middle East Political and Economic Institute, mepay.com. And it talks about the Greater Israel, the history of the Zionist movement, and geopolitical consequences or benefits for this project. I'm not gonna go from the beginning of it, but there were specific chapters. This second chapters, I guess 2.1, 2.2, and the third chapter. that I'm going to go through. So bear with me. I think this is worth reading. I hope we can learn something from it. So let me just enlarge this window. All right. So Theodor Herzl and the Zionist movement. Theodor Herzl is not the first proponent of a Jewish state. This is true. In fact, Napoleon talked about creating some sort of buffer state in the Levant back in the day. He also suggested they should make a Christian majority country, i.e., what would be Lebanon today, and use that almost as a buffer state against the remaining Arab and Muslim countries in order to, you know, procure Western geopolitical objectives. So he is not the first one to talk about this. He also suggested a Jewish state as well. So it's been floating. But anyway, Theodor Herzl is not the first proponent of a Jewish state. However, the history of territorial claims to land from Palestine will have, however, not be analyzed in this article. It dates back at least a couple of centuries ago when Palestine was not only option considered for a Jewish state before Balfour Declaration. The Uganda option, among others, was rejected by the World Zionist Organization at the beginning of the 20th century. And this is what I mean when people say Zionism is a secular ideology. It yes and no, but its roots come from religious extremism, though. If you read the Tanakh or the Old Testament, you will see this in Genesis 15:18, in Numbers 34, I believe, and Ezekiel 47 or 43. I don't remember, but you can check back in the video prior to this segment where they talk about the boundaries of Greater Israel and whatnot. So, and on top of that, within the Old Testament, there is ample evidence of justifying massacres and genocides against Moabites, Canaanites, all types of people that, according to the God of the Tanakh or the Old Testament, are should be justifiably slaughtered for the Jews to take that land. But anyway, however, his and his group's work resulted in the 1948 foundation of Israel as a state, and what the Palestinians call a Nakba, i.e., the mass forced displacement of inhabitants from the future land of Israel. Adrian Stein explains the Herzl personally organized. Explains that Herzl. Fuck's sakes. Adrian Stein explains that Herzl personally organized the first Zionist conference between the 29th and 31st of August in 1897 at the Stead Casino in Basel. In Book 6 of Herzl's diaries, beginning in 1898, Herzl describes a discussion he had with German imperialist Chancellor Prince Hohenlohe, in which he is asked how much land is expected to be needed for the envisioned state. His reply was, "We will ask for what we need. The more immigrants, the more land." In the same discussion, he explains, "We want autonomy and self-protection." And this is something, I'm not going to say it baffles me anymore, but the audacity for many Europeans to accuse the Muslims and the Arabs of anti-Semitism when this has been part of your culture for I don't know how long. You know, it's insane. You know. But anyway, territorial demands mentioned in various instances of this book vary in formulation, but they essentially describe a territory larger than Israel, 1967, broadly recognized borders, or the ones of Palestinian occupied territories. An example is, I wrote on a slip of paper, Sinai Peninsula, Egyptian, Palestine, Cyprus, Sinai, El Arish, Cyprus Plan, from Herzl's book Patai and translation. I don't know, but it's one of his books at least. In the discussion with Bodenheimer related to the area from the brooks of Egypt to the Euphrates, described in Book 2. The plan of a large stage process was discussed with the aim to introduce it to the Ottoman government, initially a Jewish governor under Ottoman sovereignty, similar to the Egyptian relation with the Sultan. And as soon as the Jewish population surpasses two-thirds, complete Jewish administration. There are many details related to Zionist developments from this period, but from the perspective of state dynamics as criterion in this study, Balfour Declaration was not approved yet by the British government. And remember that Sir Balfour, Alfred Balfour, I believe he was an ardent anti-Semite. But anyway, the world had not yet begun to decolonize, and the Ottoman Empire was in regression, allowing colonial powers like the United Kingdom and France to increase their influence in Ottoman territories. In the territory of Ottoman Palestine, the state-centered approach was appearing in the form of national aspirations as defined by the mandates, i.e. an auto-determination that also abolished the Ottoman Empire, which in my opinion really don't make any sense from the point of view of the Arabs, actually, since they claim to be Muslims, right? The Ottoman Empire was a Islamic caliphate, so why do you have a problem being ruled by a Islamic caliphate? That to me doesn't make any. Well, it makes sense if you look at it from a nationalist perspective, but that also makes the whole Arab world very hypocritical in that sense that you don't like to be you talk about a Islamic ummah, but you don't like it when non-Arabs rule that ummah, be it Persian, Ottoman, or anybody else that's not Arab. But regardless, well, particularly Arab Sunni, but the Ottoman Empire was a predominantly Sunni empire. Anyway, it is rather difficult to identify the universalism degree of Herzl's demand for land. There is a broad agreement among researchers that the Bible does not represent a scientific historical source. True. Hence, the narrative of return to Israel or greater Israel can be associated with an argumentative discourse, not a detailed history of the region or demographic realities on the ground. Without denying this possibility, it can also observed that the demand looks like the deal proposals for certain decision makers at certain times in history rather than a clear delimitation of territory. It can be maximalist in order to obtain as much as possible through negotiation, and it is presented as dynamic when replying to Prince Hohenlohe that more migrants will require more land. Another relative aspect of the land demand is the readiness to buy the land from the Arab and Greek owners. Should this land had been Israeli, why buy it from existing lawful owners? And should the thesis of barren land propagate in the media or vacant land holds true? Again, why buying it? Consequentially, it can be asserted that the character of Herzl's land demand is not universal. While there were reasons for the Zionist movement to consider founding an independent Jewish state, the location and modality to implement such a project were subject to longer previous negotiations with power guarantees of those times, i.e., the former colonial powers, Germany, and later the United States. These were subjective agreements. In 1948, the State of Israel was founded on inhabited Palestinian lands, and although land has been bought, reportedly more than 750,000 Palestinians were forcibly displaced from their homes. The displacement of Palestinians and conflicts in the occupied Palestinian territories continue to take place. Israel also fought wars with its Arab neighboring countries on more occasions, and the region remains relatively unstable. And this is a excuse that a lot of Zionists use, all right? Well, the Palestinians sold their own land. No, most Palestinians were actually forcefully displaced. Yes, there were Palestinian landowners, bourgeoisie people that sold land, that collaborated with the enemy. This is not news. Um, in fact, the Haganah and Irgun and all these terrorist groups that would later form the IDF, they much of their ethnic cleansing could actually take place because they used infiltrators, Palestinian traders, or rival tribes to their benefit. So uh, this is and this has been the problem throughout the Middle East and the Arab world in general. I would argue, perhaps even Africa, when it comes to certain anti-colonial struggles, is that these places are very tribal, and colonial powers have often been able to divide and conquer and use different ethnic groups, different tribes and clans and whatnot against each other in order to steal land and occupy. But anyway, the Odid Yinun plan. Anyway, this is a very famous plan, often spoken in alternative media and whatnot. But the Odid Yinun plan. The autonomy and self-protection goals stated by Herzl were achieved, although the self-protection aim is heavily reliant on American European military aid to this day. In the 1982 essay, A Strategy for Israel in the 1980s by Oded Yinun, further geopolitical ideas related to the region are discussed. In line with Israel's position and conflicts with its neighbors, this can be equated with a handbook of dissolution of Arab countries. Authors Yinun claimed that the world transits to a new epoch in human history. Can also be seen as truism. Every day is a new day for the entire humanity, and the establishment of epochs is different for different cultures, despite the increase of globalization. The paper identifies Israel mentions the along the Western world, mentions the threat of a quote unquote multi-dimensional global war, and the dimensions of the global confrontation which will face us in the future. It is a paper on war, essentially. After extensively presenting various diversity aspects of Arab societies, some of them being cosmopolite for centuries anyway, including Algeria, Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq, the plan begins to present dissolution scenarios for these countries along religious or ethnical lines. A Christian Coptic state in Egypt that could lead a downfall and dissolution of Egypt, in its turn triggering the fall of Libya and Sudan. The article further states Lebanon's total dissolution into 5 provinces serves as a precedent for the entire Arab world, including Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and the Arabian Peninsula, and is already following that track. The dissolution of Syria and Iraq later into ethnically or religiously unique areas, such as in Lebanon, is Israel's primary target on the Eastern Front in the long run, while the dissolution of the military power of those states serves as the primary short-term target. Syria will fall apart, in accordance with its ethnic and religious structure, into several states such as in present-day Lebanon, so that there will be a Shiite Alawi state along its coast, a Sunni state in the Aleppo area, another Sunni state in Damascus, hostile to its northern neighbor, and the Druze who will set up a state, maybe even in our Golan, and certainly in the Harun and northern Jordan. This state of affairs will be the guarantee for peace and security in the area in the long run, and that aim is already within our reach today. This long citation is representative for the Israeli divide et impera view in the region and at least part of the acting directions, and a conflict between Iraq and Iran was expected, according to the article. Yeah, this was written in the early 80s. So to the lead to lead to Iraq's dissolution, which Yinun defined as more important for us than that of Syria. The article uses questionable terms like, for example, liquidation of Jordan under the present regime. The last part is pretty important, and this is something that a lot of these Arab leaders don't understand or think very short term, perhaps. One of the reasons why they have abandoned the Palestinian cause is because they want to look out after their own power and maintain their own corrupt rule. But from Mr. Yinun's own words, they can be the next target as well. They probably will be the next target. And we see this with Donald Trump talking about moving the Palestinians to Jordan or to Egypt and northern Saudi Arabia. That would cause massive ripple effects in the region because now you're transferring hostile populations to these countries that already face, with the exception perhaps of Saudi Arabia maybe, but Egypt and Jordan, they already face populations that have economic hardship. They have hostility with the government. And on top of that, they hypothetically now would bring in a battle hardened Palestinian population, which have probably a lot of hatred against these governments because they ignored and aided the genocide against them and the land grab and so forth. And this could lead to the overthrow of these governments. So Donald Trump, if he actually means what he says, and if he would hypothetically conduct this plan, yeah, this would definitely be in the benefit of the greater Israel. This means Israel can seize more land. Unless these Arab governments wise the F up. But who knows? They're usually puppeteers and they love to be humiliated by their Western and Israeli backers. They talked about the destruction of various Arab states, among them Syria, Iraq, if I'm not mistaken, Libya as well. Well, General Wes Clark talked about this back in 2005, I believe, about how he was given a security memorandum where America was supposed to knock out or destroy 7 or 6 states in the region, and that would be Libya, Iraq, Syria, Iran, Somalia, Afghanistan, and then finishing off with Iran or something like that, right? And they pretty much Lebanon as well. They have pretty much succeeded to a certain extent, but in a way they've also been hampered. You see, in 2003, when they overthrew Saddam Hussein in Iraq, Iraq also came under a lot of influence under Iran. This is a neighboring Shia country, and Iran has trained a lot of the Shia militias who have been fighting ISIS and also coalition forces. And even Israel, America, Saudi Arabia has acknowledged that maybe it wasn't such a good idea to overthrow Saddam Hussein after all. But so it wasn't as smooth sailing as perhaps as this paper want to make it seem. But there have been talks in the past to divide Iraq into 3 layers: a Kurdish state, a Sunni state, Sunni Arab state, and a Shia Arab state. And yeah, that's it. Syria. When Syria fell, Syria wasn't supposed to fall. That wasn't the goal of the sudden movement of the HTS and their allies in Idlib. They were only supposed to take certain parts of Aleppo or maybe the M4 highway. But because they saw the Syrian Arab army slowly but surely collapsing and faster rate due to so much corruption and mismanagement, they just pushed further and further ahead, and eventually they took the country. Now, I believe the Syria that we see today is not going to exist. So I agree with this paper when it comes to Syria. Syria has already been carved up by Israel. Israel has taken pretty much most of the Golan Heights. They've raised the flag in Mount Harun, and the Druze in Syria have, well, from what I've seen on Telegram posts, videos, and whatnot, they have said that they want to rather be part of Israel than Syria, and the the coastal parts of Syria, Latakia, for example, there is still resistance against the HTS government because this is a very Alawite dominated region. And the HTS views them as infidels and whatnot. So they're fighting back. But I believe, just like this paper says, there's just way too much ethnic and sectarian division in Syria at the moment, and is being fueled by this Takfiri ideology. And that's why you see that these Takfiris who have taken over Syria, this is Julani and his gang, they have barely mentioned anything about Israel's blatant violation of Syria's territorial integrity. That's because they serve the same masters, right? And they have the same purpose, and that is to divide and conquer the Middle East. I believe Turkey, and just not just me, but Turkey will take probably the northern parts of Syria, and Israel will take large parts of the south, and that's the end of Syria. And right now, HTS is attacking Lebanon in order to destroy Hezbollah. I don't know exactly how the state of Hezbollah is at the moment. There's not a there's conflicting reports. Some say that they are still receiving weapon shipments. Others say they're not. But yeah, it's a huge defeat for Hezbollah if they can't get a new route for weapons. But it seems that it seems that Hezbollah will have to disarm eventually if they can't find a new weapons route. So yeah, but anyway, and this is the problem with the axis of resistance in Iran. I've talked about it before. Iran has major economic issues, and you can't blame all of it on sanctions. This deserves a video of its own, but there's a lot of privatization, neoliberal reforms, and corruption in Iran, and this is the reason why they can't properly fight back against Israel. Don't get me wrong. The Iranian army is very strong. They have a lot of good defenses, but that's the problem. Only good defenses. The Iranian economy is not like the Russian economy. It's not a war economy in that sense, right? And that's the problem, because there is a pretty powerful faction within the Islamic Republic that wants to get closer to the West. I believe that they indirectly somewhat wanted Israel to sort of get rid of Iran's proxies in the region. And this faction is very dangerous, and I really don't understand why Sayyid Ali Khamenei allows these people to run rampant. And this is one of the reasons why I don't want religious zealots to be in charge of government a lot of times. They should focus more on morality questions or issues rather than economic and state issues. But hey, it is what it is. This is the government we picked. We have to deal with it. So anyway, let's proceed. Ralph Schoenman, an author criticized for personal ideological bias and attributing some of Israel's misleads to U.S. instigation, lists in his book, The Hidden History of Zionism, what he calls a strategy for conquest, based on analysis of Yunus plan, divide and rule, dissolving Lebanon and fragmented Syria, and assault on Iran, targeting Iraq, double-crossing Mubarak, weakening Saudi Arabia, and dissolution of Arabian Peninsula states and depopulation of Palestine. Schoenman claims that Yunus' ideas were not isolated. They had been presented by Ariel Sharon and Moshe Arens, as well as the Labour Party. He also lists that NOs of Labour parties in 1984 political platform: no to a Palestinian state, no to recognition with Palestinian Liberation Organization, which must be assessed from the perspective of results, no to the 1967 borders, and no to the removal of settlements. In the 1980s, Israel was already a dynamic state with new territories occupied after the 1967 war and maintained in the 1973 war, and with an ongoing settler colonialism project. This approach remained very state-focused, and the only focus was basically the state of Israel, while the Yunus plan saw all surrounding and other Arab states as candidates for dissolution based on ethnical and religious criteria. Interesting. Yeah, Iran. Again, this is why I don't understand some of the opposition people to the. Well, I understand because they look at it from a short-term perspective. Some opposition people against the Islamic Republic, they ally themselves with Israel. And there's a lot of young, ignorant people in Iran, unfortunately, because of the stupidity of the Islamic Republic when it comes to informing people about these things, that they don't understand who they are supporting or allying themselves with. Israel has plans for Iran too. They have been actively supporting Kurdish nationalist separatists. They have been actively supporting pan-Turkist movements in the north with their Azerbaijani ally. And the UAE, United Arab Emirates, has been supportive of Arab separatists in the south, along with the CIA. The CIA has also been very supportive of ISIS Khorasan, or ISIS-K, and we've seen them conducting various terrorist activities. They also, both the CIA and Mossad, has been supportive of Mujahideen Khalq. CIA has also been supportive of the Baluch separatist movements and certain Salafist movements in Baluchistan, as well as in Iranian Kurdistan. My point being that they want to divide Iran as well. They want to create a Kurdish state. They want to give Azerbaijan to the Iranian Azerbaijan to the northern Azerbaijani Republic, so to speak. And there will basically, and the Arab parts will be like an independent state too, or maybe they'll click it up with Iraq or something. I don't know. It's divide and conquer of Iran too. And these people think that they don't think long term. They think that Israel and America and the West is going to bring them this market economy of freedom and all this stuff. They don't understand geopolitical consequences of this. And the Libyans are seeing it right now. Libya is a fractured country. Syria is a very fractured country. And this will be the future of Iran. There won't be no Iran left if these people would succeed. My worries is that the economic incompetence of the Islamic Republic could lead to this, actually. So it still has a lot of supporters, a strong base, but they also face a lot of opposition. But anyway, let's continue. Saul Cohen's geopolitical definition and other current views. Let's just see how much do we have here. Yeah, let's continue. Saul Cohen's Geopolitics was published initially in 2003 and published in 2009 and 2015. Two aspects of his work appear to confirm a geopolitical view that are connected with Israel's regional situation and its geopolitical constraints. The definition of a nation claims to power and the concept of geopolitical structure that includes highly autonomous regions and quasi states. The four pillars of a nation claims to power mentioned in his book are an overwhelming military strength and the will to use this power, surplus economic energy to be provided as aid or investment to other countries, ideological leadership, and a cohesive governance system. While his work is generally very descriptive on Western concepts, the definition can be perceived rather as a definition of U.S. military power if one considered the first two pillars. Assuming that Israel is still working on the development of economy and that overall military power included massive exogenous support, the claim of Israel to power could be eventually accommodated in a regional setting. Although the author does not detail on a superpower competition's impact on Israel, the work states that the radical geopolitical restructuring is a continuous process in the context of an increasing number of states on the globe and an advance of multipolarity and regionalism, potentially as a confirmation of Oded Yinun's plan. The book also states that the Middle East has become even more fractured as a shatter belt. Further confirming on Yinun's dissolution view, Cohen claims that in approximately 25 years, the number of national states could increase from 200 to 250 in what he calls a devaluation process. However, although mentioning the national states, Cohen immediately switches to the notion of these new geoterritorial entities that are expected to become highly autonomous quasi-states and not national states as initially mentioned. Another term that appears to confirm the idea of a possible dissolution of states is that of national states' demise, associated in his book with strengthening of world and regional governing bodies, influence of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, economic developments. Cohen even suggested regions with the potential to become, in his view, independent or quasi-states. Quebec, Crete, Catalonia, Scotland, Wales, Chechnya, Somaliland, Arab Palestine, Iraqi Kurdistan, among others, and possible new confederations, listing China and Taiwan, former Yugoslav states, and the Baltic states, among others. In Chapter 12, The Middle East Shatter Belt, the author presents a map that includes Turkey in the Shatter Belt region. The map does not mark large parts of Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Yemen as effective national territory. Neom, for example, was not marked as an effective national territory in this book. It marks the entire Israeli territory either as ecumens or effective national territory, a small part of the West Bank and no region from Gaza as effective national territory. Most of Jordan's territory is also not marked as effective national territory. Ecumenes are defined as areas of greatest density of population and economic activity, and effective national territories and effective regional territories as moderately populated areas with favorable resource bases. All these concepts appear to support, justify Israel's regional expansion aspirations and previous concepts like barren, vacant land. Although this book is theorization and probably author's opinion, this type of opinion has potential to move the discussion from the territorial integrity or political independence of any state to another area in which regions from sovereign states, be they strong or weak, are not marked as effective national territories based on subjective definitions, of course. Definitions, yes. Of course, this does not directly infringe upon territorial sovereignty of these countries, but the possibility of interpretation cannot be ruled out, especially in this terminology setting. And in the context of political declaration of certain Israeli politicians related to Ottoman Palestine, Jordan may feel threatened, Egypt as well, and President Erdogan stated in May 2024, Quote, if this state of Israel is not stopped, it will set its eyes on Anatolia with its delusion of promised land. Another important concept from this book is that of equilibrium along with turbulence and world order from a system perspective. That again points to a developmental approach, mentioning Herbert Spencer's organic growth analogy. Um, Israeli military analysts and politicians have actually, some of them have talked about shifting focus to Turkey rather than Iran. But I highly doubt that there will be a war between these two. But yeah, because Turkey is a NATO ally. But who cares about that, right? I mean, Greece and Turkey are also, like, both. Greece is also a NATO ally. They also went to war over Cyprus, if I'm not wrong. But yeah, well, sometimes interests can collide, but I doubt that they will, though. I think that they will carve up the territory, and that's about it. I'm gonna have to skip certain parts of this article because it's gonna be very long. But anyway, therefore, how is Greater Israel goal reflected in contemporary literature and media reports analyzed above? Probably the most important aspect is that it's not much different than it was in the beginning of the 20th century or the 1980s from the geopolitical perspective. Adrian Stein utilizes the title From the Euphrates to the Nile. Saul Cohen insists on the same terminology that accommodated overtaking land by force and by defining characteristics for the so-called New Ages. The theses that appear to drive the Greater Israel expansion appear to be connected to the notion of a dynamic state in the sense of territorial expansion for Israel if one considers the security threat discussed above and the dissolution of Arab states discussed in the Oded Yinun plan. All materials analyzed appear to have been state-centered, irrespective of their direction. The universalism character of geopolitical hypothesis appears to be rather inexistent and inconsistent from a possible replication perspective. Likewise, the universalism of claims related to a potential new global civilization entered in Israel is yet to be demonstrated, and if it was demonstrated, there is no clear hint on how long such a civilization could potentially last. Anyway, I think we're reaching the last part here, and that is one of the most important chapters in this article, and that is potential geopolitical implications of Greater Israel Project. Although not new, the Greater Israel Project appears to receive renewed attention in the light of the most recent war from Gaza, that reportedly led to deaths of more than 34,000 and wounding over 78,000 Palestinians, and the prospects for a potential war in Lebanon. This recent Gaza development appears to at least pause the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia, which was one of the goals, as we know, right? Because Saudi Arabia was about to normalize ties with Israel prior to this. But should Israel pursue its Greater Israel Project, those maps will match Herzl's territorial demands and clearly hints at extending its territory in Saudi Arabia, including Neom, and according to Avi Lipkin, Mecca and Medina, the envisioned regional peace becomes an unclear concept. There is no long term, and Avi Lipkin is the the guy that spoke in the beginning of the video. Core, there is no long term. Core concept identified in analyzed publications that hint at a public restraint of Israel from expanding its territory. It is thus difficult to distinguish based on analyzed data between a potential strategic patience of Greater Israel planners that could envision a longer timing for this project and a step-by-step approach, and a potential agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia along other neighbors to form a sort of alliance union with a map that the Israeli soldiers recently displayed. However, given the situation at this point in history, and in historic tendency of Israeli strategists towards a state-centered approach, the latter opinion is probably unlikely. The regional geopolitical dynamics appear to be marked by various forms of conflicts that hint towards an active Greater Israel project, a potential normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, and an increasing confrontation between Iran and its allies and Israel. The U.S. and its allies, on the other hand, in this confrontation, Turkey appears to play no significant role, and Saudi Arabia appears to wait for a certain event to pick a direction. And this event would be reportedly the recognition by Israel of a Palestinian state. Saul Cohen's view was that global organizations tend to weaken state sovereignty. This state centered approach was expressed probably from a geopolitical perspective that does not include the importance of trade. It must be, however, emphasized that Israel is relying particularly on the US, UK, and other allies rather than United Nations Security Council to carry out this defensive policy. Furthermore, the tensions derived from potential arrest warrant for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by the International Criminal Court have resulted in a further distancing between Israel and the international organizations. Yes. The approach to Greater Israel Project may determine various regional and global reactions. Until recently, the essentially gray line approach to the occupied Palestinian territories, which could be perceived as a long-term, slow-paced settlement project, since it resulted in the increase of settlement units, along with what the media often calls Egyptian and Lebanese economic and financial difficulties, have ensured a certain advancement of Israel outside its 1967 borders. However, although other successes were marked, like the recent Abraham Accords, it must also be emphasized that it was not able to maintain the occupation of Sinai Peninsula or the puppet state it helped create and supported in southern Lebanon back in the 80s. And Lebanon is a special case of its own. But anyway, likewise, although Syria is facing serious hardships, it did not disintegrate. It's going to disintegrate sooner or later, I believe. Likewise, the deal that Ankara signed with Baghdad will probably increase security in the Iraqi Kurdistan region rather than creating further potential for wider conflicts. From this perspective, the shatter belt characteristic of the region appears to be a rather stable instability than an unstable one. No major geopolitical change has occurred so far, and no border has been redrawn. This article is wrong because Israel has taken much of Syria, so it has been redrawn. Furthermore, and they're ethnically cleansing the West Bank as we speak, by the way. Furthermore, states like Iran, Turkey, and Egypt have become very vigilant from this perspective. Iraq appears to reemerge as a regional economic power that can catalyze a regional power relations. These short-term regional tendencies appear to strengthen the region's capacity to react to potential extension of Israel's borders by force. While Israel's support in the U.S. remains strong across the entire political spectrum, the political and economic costs of potential broader war near Israel borders can rise for the traditional superpower. In the wider context of superpower confrontation paradigm, a generally increasing confrontational scene and a potential global arms race whose alleged goals are self-defense, whether the meaning is American priorities may become more pronounced in this context, whatever they might be. A potential plan by Israel to become a trade hub route connecting Europe to Asia and win leverage as a hydrocarbon supplier, especially for Europe, is facing challenges from more directions. China will probably remain a user of the existing Suez Canal, probably India as well, unless it receives more economic and political incentives from the proponents of alternatives. Likewise, Turkey is already an important hub for gas and oil pipelines and is emerging as the route for the Middle East Middle Corridor trade route as well. Hence, while Israel can offer alternatives to old and new trade routes, the same regionalism and multipolarity that Saul Cohen mentioned can lead to new economic development patterns that will demand Israel to imagine new and efficient regional policies that could or could not rely on the same level of support from traditional security partners. Whether these potential new paradigms are compatible with the traditional and actual Greater Israel goal remains to be analyzed, primarily by Israel, its neighbors, and its regional partners in the first instance. This article makes a lot of good points, but like I said, it missed the. This was probably obviously written before the fall of the Assad government in Syria. But yeah, since the fall of the Assad government of Syria, they have taken much of the Golan Heights. And my problem is here, though, or my speculation is that Israel could not hold on too long to all of these new territories, hypothetically, if a larger, greater Israel would emerge. And why do I say that? That is because Israel's armed forces on the ground has proven to be very ineffective. They lost in Gaza, and when it came to fights with the Ridwan forces of Hezbollah, they also lost there. They couldn't take southern Lebanon. Israel, however, has a very strong air power. They have strong intelligence services, and that's their strong game. But their ground forces are not as effective as people think, and that has been proven again and again because they haven't been defeating Hamas or the Palestinian resistance at all. In fact, I think it was Anthony Blinken that said that Hamas has recruited up to 20 plus thousand people again, or 12,000 or something like that. So we also saw that when with the release of certain Israeli war captives and hostages, that Hamas is still very much indeed strong and active. So no, and when you overstretch your military capacity, it can be a problem for you, and it can lead to collapse. Actually, collapse of the Israeli economy and so forth. But Israel is facing major internal political crisis as well. But the region has definitely been shaken by the fall of the Assad government in Syria. So, but yeah, this is the end of the video, guys. I wanted to do this video because I think it's very relevant to talk about the roots of Zionism, really, which is actually from religion. It is from Judaism itself, actually. So obviously, different Jewish factions will disagree on how this will be interpreted, and you have ultra-Orthodox Jews that are anti-Zionist. They believe that God sent them into exile for a reason and whatnot. I have to study more upon their point of view as well, and I'm gonna continue to study the Old Testament, and I will come back with more videos regarding Zionism, regarding the history of the colonization of Palestine, and as well. And we also have to do a deep dive on Wahhabism and Salafism and so forth, and the Muslim Brotherhood, because they are also the long arm of the Western intelligence services, as well as the Mossad to a large extent. We talked about that before in my Syria videos, so stay tuned on that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you liked the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share and comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.